Hello, everyone. David Martino here with you. I'd like to spend a couple of minutes with you now talking a little bit about the Learning Skills Initiative, the Learner Skills Initiative, the LSI, which really is foundational to the Arupe way, to not only what we do, but also will touch on and should inform how we do um, our education here. Um, The LSI is grounded in two dimensions of student experience. Starting on the left side, we have eruditio, the acquisition of knowledge. So we're concerned with obviously students' thinking, their minds, as schools are. Um, Additionally, we're concerned with pietà, the formation of the student's individual moral and personal character in the service of the common good. And that's really important, probably expected coming out of the values of a Catholic educational institution. But sometimes we forget that, especially when students are taking, one-off courses, possibly through their home school, but then, in the online context through AVLI, meeting new teachers, new participants across North America. Sometimes the idea that they're still in a Catholic learning institution and that institution shares the same values of formation may become rhetorical rather than lived, because students and people often will privilege our lived experience over these virtual experiences, which creates a very first sort of need for us, which is to create the virtual experience as a real experience. And that immediately means creating community, creating opportunity and invitation for encounter with each other. And intentionally making sure that each and every course at AVLI works its way through the subject content area, the knowledge, into the deeper formations of the student, but also that the learning is extended out from the virtual into the real world. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But let's start with where this begins in its thinking. We start with the individual student and their mind. And moving from left to right, we go through executive functioning into it's three and a half really categories of we can understand them as the individual learner. And the individual learner begins importantly at the top or sort of at that core with their mindset, the academic mindset. We'll talk a bit about this later on. I'll sort of use another tool to delve into each one of the five key categories in a little bit more detail. But academic mindset, do they have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset? A lot of recent work talking about how integral and foundational the mindset is to success in learning and students' willingness and belief in their own ability to grow as learners. So the individual's motivation, their goal setting, their planning and time management are all elements of their mindset. So, uh, you know, in our courses, we sometimes think that these things, the students come to us with these academic elements or behaviors or skills ready-made and done. And we don't often, and we sometimes end up penalizing them when these things aren't present, i.e. time management, things are late. We penalize them as though there's a kind of content area relationship to what we're punishing, when in fact there may be a learning skill that is underdeveloped or maybe has never intentionally been taught with the student, and they're working out of a set of bad habits. Um, and really, if we sort of got to know them well enough, we might recognize that. And again, the learning skills quiz that you'll see in the next installment of this module gives you a sense of how we try to tease out some pre-knowledge of where students are within this rubric, so that teachers might begin by kind of having a sense of, I might need to teach some of that. I might need to kind of do a bit of work, or at least provide some resources to persons around some of these things, so that what I will be assessing ultimately is their relationship to the content. And that I've helped to build up the learner and their skills. And so those elements are sort of core to that individual learner. We then move into, out of that sort of interior kind of core sense of themselves as a learner, their behaviors, how they do school, how they take notes, how they study, how they organize themselves, all these types of things. Again, things we don't often require them to submit to us so that we can give them feedback and then model or provide models or help them in terms of developing better practices. Um, but that really should be part of, with AVLI, some of the things that we are interested about our learners. Their academic perseverance, in terms of their ability to structure their environments for learning. When they don't succeed, when they make mistakes, how do they respond to those? Are they open to those as growth opportunities, or are those mistakes affirming of negative mindsets and fixed mindsets? Those are sort of deep psychological things. This is not just sort of in schooling. There's a lot of like therapy comes out of that whole world that recognizes that we're bound within our language sometimes. And so if I do poorly, I'm a bad math student, or I'm bad at English, or I guess I'm just bad at this. And so we want to give students opportunities as individual learners to fail, but to not be punished by those failings. Opportunities to make revisions, to be informed through feedback, and have help seeking guidance through us, through online resources, through their peers, very importantly. And that sort of takes us to that sort of, that evolution of themselves as an individual learner into elements of communication and learning self-assessment. They metacognate on these things. They become more aware of where they are in all of those preceding sort of elements and categories. And as that begins to happen, they can move more acutely into critical thinking. Notice how now we're not talking just about critical thinking in terms of the application of their content, of the subject area, but their own critical thinking and reasoning about themselves as learners. They move into self-reflection about this, and then in relationship to the content. And they can then move into the sort of deeper domains of this rubric, which is the social values processing, the self-transcendence, where they can take what they've learned. They can take who they understand themselves to be as learners in the world, and they can make choices now about how to act on that knowledge in the world, whether that be in relation to social justice, to diversity and pluralism, to ecology, um, to elements in the ways that this is not an ideological kind of statement, into the ways in which they see these things relative to their lived lives and experiences, but again, in the service of the common good. Um, and so there's a real sense of progression with the LSI rubric from, again, that singular motivation and mindset of me as a learner, what I believe about myself as a human here in this world who can learn or cannot, not just as a math student or an English student, and how I kind of circle back to that greater sort of value of the recognition of me as a human person who gains and seeks out knowledge to act back into that world. And so there's a kind of an evolution, yet a circularity to this kind of process as well. And so I invite you to kind of hold on to this. Again, you may sort of have thought, well, I'm starting this professional learning over the summer to just build out my course. And in fact, you are doing that. And the very practical, logistical things involved in that will happen. But the LSI really should touch all aspects of what you're building through your intention. And you'll build through effective communication, engagement, and assessment practices, sort of key AVLI way language. But those elements are ways that we incarnate opportunities to realize these learnings. And so the LSI is really fundamental to our mission and our values, to what informs the kind of relationship that we hope to have, and the effect we hope to have with and upon our learners. So thank you for your time. We'll loop back to this throughout the course of the summer professional learning. So until then.